I appreciate everyone battling trains and whatever else happened this morning to get here. My name is Nayeem, one of the general partners at Emmeline Ventures, co-hosting this event with our dear friends at Fenwick. We did this event for Tech Week last year, and it was the room looked just like this. It was fabulous. I will note there are probably 5 or 6 more men in the room than there were last year, which is fantastic. Thank you for being here. We had one last year, and he's a friend of mine, so it doesn't actually count. So we're really happy to have you all here. This conversation for us is really important. We like, as a fund, to dig into women's health and everything, not that's happening, but what's coming and what we can do. And with an election year upon us, we had to go there on the election. So we have 2 panels. First one will focus on women's health and AI, and a little bit of longevity, and then the second one will get into the election and all the things that we can all be thinking about headed towards the fall. So, please.
So I just want to say a welcome to everyone from Fenwick. I personally live for rooms like this. It is really exciting to bring all of you together, not just to experience the wisdom of our speakers, but also to connect with each other. That's really what Jen and I live for. So here at Fenwick, if you don't know anything about Fenwick, we are a technology and life sciences firm. We work exclusively with companies and investors in tech and life sciences across their lifespan. But for Jen and I, we're really energized personally by topics that relate to women's health. And so really what we've tried to do with Nayeem is build a series of panels and content over the course of 2024 where we're bringing you all together to talk to each other and to learn. So we just want to welcome you. We hope this isn't the end of the conversation, and afterwards please stick around, meet 5 new people, make connections, and enjoy Tech Week. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, okay, we'll jump into panel 1. One other thing I'll say really quickly. So Emmeline Ventures, we're based out of LA. We invest everywhere: women's health, financial services, sustainability. I have 2 fabulous partners. One of them is here. She'll raise her hand in the back. And our third partner went to Tulsa this morning for other meetings. So we rarely have all 3 of us in the same room. Today we have 2 of us. So find us if you want to talk more later. So, okay. Hi.
Hi.
How are you all?
Kind of good.
So the first discussion we wanted to have is AI is the buzzword of the day, of the year, and it's great, and there's a lot of really great work happening. The place where the intersection is most exciting and probably most problematic is the intersection with women's health, and that has everything to do with data gaps, research gaps, all the things. And so I wanted to bring these 3 together because they're each in the depths of that and building in incredible ways and have a very unique, compelling perspective on what happens when we get it right. So I want each of you to introduce yourselves, and then we will roll from there.
Perfect. So my name's Amanda. I'm the CEO of Emma. Emma is an AI assistant that makes women happier and healthier, and women encounter her in places that they already are. So think a breast pump app that you're already using, or perhaps your therapist's website. And I'm just thrilled to be here. We launched AI pre-ChatGPT, pre a lot of AI, so I'm excited to talk about how it's changed over the years as well.
You know what's really funny is the person who introduced us told me that. He was like, she's been doing ChatGPT since before ChatGPT was a thing. And I was like, well, you have to introduce me to this human.
Hi.
It sounded like it's working. Anyway, go ahead.
AI?
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to say that a lot today.
Hi, my name is Athena. I'm founder and CEO of Celeste. We're an AI clinical decision support platform that delivers personalized treatment plans. Think of it like the hinge for treatments, matching patients with the most effective, compliant treatments to improve their outcomes and improve clinical workforce productivity as well.
Is this, oh, yes. Okay, yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Noel Pugh. I'm CEO and co-founder of Lōvu Health. Some of you might know that as Lōvu, but we've rebranded for health literacy reasons. Think of us as a digital operating system, next generation, that plugs into an OB's office. It's a multi-stakeholder tech stack We've got a mom's application, a care coordination platform. All of these things operationalize a new model of wellness. We call it continuously connected wellness on behalf of moms and covered by insurance. So that's a game-changing element of our platform. And we're partnered with Emma, so excited to unpack that a little bit today.
Thank you all for being here. The first thing I wanted to start with, and Noel, we'll start with you, is I like to think, if you know me well enough, my brain works in spreadsheets, but I like to think about the data in healthcare as a value chain. So it starts somewhere and it goes somewhere, and hopefully there's a virtuous circle back. That, in the context of women's health, works in some cases, doesn't work in other cases. So if you could take us through just a little bit of where the gaps are in that chain today.
So this is a panel in of itself, and I call myself a recovering healthcare administrator, and saw the gaps far before I became a founder. I think there's two major areas that really rise up. One is data integrity, the other is data continuity. Unpacking data integrity. Some of you might know there's like sort of a new position on the horizon in healthcare delivery systems. It's called the Clinical Documentation Integrity Officer. Here's the issue. When you actually go to research this position, you'll find Clinical Decision Information Officer, Clinical Decision Interoperability Officer. We can't even agree on the acronym of what this position should be called, let alone what means data with integrity, so garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we're overlaying the most incredible models on top of data that is incomplete or data that is frankly incorrect, we've got major problems. The NIH recently published a white paper that said all of these models are for naught if we don't have the ability for a patient to actually come in and sort of correct her own data. When is the last time you went to the doctor's office, got a report out from Athena, NextGen, Epic, of this is what the doctor said about me, and I actually don't agree? That doesn't even exist today. We don't even have the opportunity to close the loop on our own data and autocorrect it. So we've got big issues with what is the right answer, let alone let's talk about gender and race and ethnicity disparity that exist in the data. The data continuity issue, this is where I'm really excited that the Lōvu platform actually solves for this. Data doesn't, disease doesn't conveniently show up every 4 weeks when a mom who's pregnant goes to a doctor's office. More often than not, when we actually show up in the ambulatory care environment, we are at a point where we're sort of outside of our normal parameter, right? We're sick. Even sicker when we access the healthcare system like a hospital. So if we're basing our learning off of these data points, as opposed to where the etiology of disease and pathology actually happens, which is in the home, or at work, or while we're sleeping, we don't have an iterative or continuous data flow that actually yields insight that we can learn from and intervene upon, so precision medicine goes out the window. So those are the two big gaps that rise up for me.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious then, Athena, when we start to fix that problem, what does it look like when we can see the data properly? We can derive insights from it. In the context of what you're building and maybe more broadly across the system, what does it look like when we get there?
Great question. And I think like a lot of it is thinking about the intersection between different entities within the healthcare system as well. You've not just, patients and clinicians is like a big part of it, but also insurance payers and pharmaceutical companies, so on and so forth. And so for us, since we think a lot about matching patients to the right treatments, whether that means the right medication, the right therapist, the right behavioral health intervention, the right clinical trial, being able to access the right data improves the precision of that matching. And it can even because we work very closely with pharmaceutical companies, it can really inform next generation drug development to make sure that the next generation of medications, they're designed considering the woman's body and considering different ethnicities, different demographic factors, socioeconomic background, so on and so forth.
What is your take on that one?
I mean, you guys have both covered, I think, some really important things around data. We do work with provider groups who work with hospital systems who will create guidelines, things like that, but where my company focuses is a lot of what you were saying with the gap that comes from the consumer. So there is such large gaps in women's health data, and it's not just impacting who builds AI, it impacts how providers treat patients, it impacts how insurance companies pay out what they need to be paying out. So I think it's about finding systems that connect all this different data together so we have the right data sources to build AI off of it. Again, it's not just building AI, it's building treatments. It's so much more than just AI. And when the data gets better everywhere, the AI can get better for everywhere, but consumers have to be a part of that. And we definitely forget them all the time in that process.
So I'm assuming everybody's semi-briefed on AI, but the tech has to get built, the data has to get captured, some kind of model in terms of driving insights has to get built, that model has to get trained in order to then deliver the insights we want from it. From your perspectives, how much training do these models need to go through to get it right in women's health? And I ask that in a couple of lenses. One, there's zero data to begin with. Two, any data that exists, forgive my mild crassness, represents Upper East Side white women. We need to cover much more intersectionality than that, right? And so how long will it take for us to do that, and what big blocks need to move, kind of well beyond what you're building?
So I don't think that there's an answer to that. I think it's like saying, when is the internet going to launch? It's going to be the best that it can be. It's going to be a continual process. We have built a lot of proprietary AI, and we've done it off of many years. We actually built our application to live within our own social tech product that was very popular. And it was built from both women and physicians were on our product. So we had an incredible proprietary data set to start from. But then we spent many years training the data on really specific end use cases. So we cover from menstruation through menopause. So some aspects of menopause were a lot more difficult to train around because the science wasn't as good. My amazing chief science officer is actually in the audience, and she builds with our dev team. But the other things were a little bit easier for her to train around, like aspects of breastfeeding, which have just been researched better, and there's more fabulous articles out there. So it depends on if the data exists, and as we improve the data, the training methods will get better as well. I'm also really excited that a lot of methods to train AI are not just done through traditional code by developers anymore. So it's giving people like Morgan, who's a medical provider, the ability to train AI with developers instead of being like, here you go, developer that's a 19-year-old boy and knows nothing. Go train this on menopause. It's not going to have the same output as the reality.
I would agree with that as well. And I think on the same note as well, it's going to take a very long time. It's going to be a continual process because people continue to evolve and change as well. A lot of what we train our models on include clinical guidelines that tend to be comprehensive to an extent, where it'll include certain aspects of treatment plans that you absolutely are a no-no when prescribing. But then what about all the side effects that cause you to have mood swings, weight fluctuations, cause you to, for lack of a better word, feel like shit about yourself? And those are the ones that cause discontinuation of different medications, treatment plans. And I think continuing to bridge that gap by working really closely with health systems, pharmaceutical companies, patients, providers, community health programs. We've been sourcing a lot of data even from consumer applications that tend to work directly with patients, so that we can train models to inform clinicians what the next generation of treatment plans could potentially look like in terms of efficacy and suitability for different types of patients.
Piggybacking off of what you're both saying, a lot going on here. Number one, I'm thinking about how often do the guidelines actually get it wrong, or they're disparate, right? You think about for breast cancer screening and whether or not you qualify for a genetic test. ASBRS has one body of guidelines, and then the American Oncology Association has another guideline. And how can we actually train the model to reconcile the guideline and ingest or imbibe the latest and greatest in clinical literature, even that which is not published, and infer when a woman should go for genetic testing associated with breast cancer prevention? To that end, I think that we can actually set up the data to learn much faster if we focus in on individual use cases. So if you think about what Lōvu's done, really focusing in on the maternal health journey from 13 weeks to a year postpartum, what we've been able to do is take that product journey and then go out to places like West Texas, go to Microsoft Mom World, which is the Pacific Northwest, collect these groups of patients and iteratively learn off of these disparate populations by focusing uniquely on that use case. I think if we try to do too much all at once, then we really don't get the variability of the population necessary in order to put the machine learning atop.
Do you think the AI will be able to resolve or help us get better at cultural competency?
If it's built by people that care about cultural competency. It's that simple, truly.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. Related, because a lot of what's happening around women's health, and we're getting better at this, but it can sometimes sit in consumer land versus in front of providers. From my perspective, in order for us to really do this at scale, we've got to be sitting next to providers because they're going to continue to be the center of care. How are you resolving that? How have you seen that be resolvable? Because we talked a little bit about who you're working with, so I would love to open that up.
I mean, I think our partnership is a great example of that. So we build AI models. We do sometimes work directly with provider groups, but my favorite partners are companies like Noel, where they're selling into the provider groups, and we have built the AI models that both the consumer and the provider need. But then she becomes the specialist, and her data set gets bigger, and our models get better for her, and it's a continual partnership. So it's about not siloing out all of the different AI companies that exist, the tech companies, the clinical guideline groups. We all have to start to build together more as an ecosystem, and that's what's going to help it, I think, a lot.
And to that end, one of the things that we have done as a firm is really understand where we're out over our skis. That's why we partnered with Amanda and Emma. Basically, we knew we couldn't build Emma. You've been at this for much longer than we have been. So we have the self-esteem and the confidence to say, where we can't build, we buddy or we buy. So to that end, not getting out over your skis. The other thing that we did in our model was recognize that community and cultural competence is the key to moving the needle on outcomes. It is not enough to say we're culturally competent. When we launched in West Texas, we learned really quickly, not only must our navigation team speak Spanish as a first language, it must also speak a dialect unique to Midland and Odessa, otherwise known as oil and gas Spanish, right? So the nomenclature is different, the language is different, and then you're able to put the machine learning and the automation atop of the competence that comes from a well-designed model. But for the design, you don't have the success of any machine learning.
And just to add to that, like from more of a, because we also kind of like work directly with like providers as well, and so thinking a little bit about like what triggers provider adoption is like making sure it really fits very well within the provider workflow, and we surface data and surface like recommendations and context and formats and jargon that they can actually adopt and understand and make their lives a lot easier. And I don't think that like every single provider on the face of the planet is going to love AI or adopt AI. Everyone has their habits, but I do think that there is a growing number of residents, young attendings, even like very experienced attendings that are really interested in adopting AI in different contexts to improve patient outcomes. And I think if we, to both your points, like if we center it on patient outcomes and how we can improve the patient experience, that's why they became doctors as well. So I think like that really like speaks to that as well.
Can I offer like a really good tip for any founders that are in here? Because you just made me think of something. There's an organization called MD++, and it's a group of residents mainly, but also like full attendings as well. And they will do projects with companies because their end goal is to eventually be a physician working with AI or technology, but they'll do it for you for free or for like internship rates. So we use them in the early days to test a lot of the models because they were in the middle of education, talk about not as much data. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted. You're going to come up with one thing that will save you money.
Just to add to that as well, our first intern, she reached out to me on MD++ when I joined it, and now she's like leading operations for our company. So it's like been an incredible trajectory.
Commercial break.
I know, I was like, do we get like paid for this?
So, and the news is always a lot of fun. So, with all the feedback that our social platforms have received, Facebook decided to stand up an AI council. If any of you have read about the AI council, it was entirely white men. Who are lovely, right? I'm sure they're lovely humans. But it doesn't actually resolve the problem, right? So I would love just your take. If you've looked, I know you've looked at their profiles and dug in. So give us your perspective on.
What do you get when you bring the founder of Stripe, GitHub, and Shopify to the table? Bro tech. That's what it is, and it's fintech as well. It's about consumerism, and which is not a bad thing if it's got a lion's eye for what we're talking about today, and it can be used for good. But we're really talking about folks that know transaction well and little to no eye for health, wellness, or whole person care. I do think it's problematic that it's all bro, but I love the guys, love you. You know, couldn't make it without you, literally obsessed with you, just check the dating apps. But long story short, I think the bigger issue is that we actually have no lens for, and you and I had talked about this earlier, health equity, right? There's a lack of diversity here that is far beyond just women. There are no other ethnographic profiles on this board. So what are we missing when we're actually designing the future of how Facebook can be used or Meta can be used when you've got, for lack of better words, a fintech bro council?
So this concerns me for a different reason. Like, we know how problematic that's going to be. The problem is that when consumers adopt any new technology, they use often the first couple of products that they're introduced to, which are often coming from places like an Instagram or their bank or wherever they're already using the technology. So they're going to start using the technology for not what it was built for. So I'm very happy. I had a conversation with a woman yesterday at a happy hour, and she told me that she found out that she had an ectopic pregnancy by talking to ChatGPT. That thrilled me, because our product would have done it better for her. But I know that if you use ChatGPT the right way, you could probably find some baseline symptoms for what was going on. But in that moment, I thought, oh my God, they're going to be going to mom Facebook groups, they're going to be going to Instagram influencer comments, and the AI right there is going to be giving them answers that are not going to catch the ectopic pregnancies, that are not going to catch the baseline awareness that we need to get them into that care pathway. And it's not just Meta. Elon Musk, which is a whole other world we could talk about one day. He also just created a competitor product to OpenAI, which he was one of their biggest investors. That's a very interesting story. Another good tip, he published the emails between, Sam Altman published the emails between him and Elon Musk. Go read them, it's fascinating. Better than like Real Housewives or whatever else you like. But yeah, anyways, but his AI is supposed to make the world better. That's like and it's basically all white males, and I think there was maybe one or two Asians, so I don't want to say that there's no, but yeah, anyways, it's concerning a lot.
I would also say that, like, to your point, just because like a lot of the people ingesting a lot of this information, they're the Gen Z population that are continuing to refine what they even think of AI right now, and what they think of like consumer applications, what they think of social media, and I think like, it's really important to be building social media in like an ethical manner, especially because like people my age, I'm 26 years old, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely go on TikTok and I'm like, oh, I saw somebody make homemade cough drops and I wanna try that. Like, so there's all these like random things that just like unnecessarily like get put in front of people's faces. And I think like making sure you have a diverse council of like different ethnicities, different, genders, making sure we think about like the intersectionality of it, making sure we think about people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, so on and so forth, and designing social media in a way that can actually positively influence the health and wellness of the next generation is going to be really important, and I'm hoping that they have a plan in place for that.
Yeah, even the censorship problems on social media are a whole nother layer of problems, which has probably affected all of your businesses in terms of marketing, and so we'll see what happens. Part of me thinks that we have so many campaigns, and we're going to talk on the next panel about more things we need to do, but there needs to be like kind of an uprising. And I've seen now multiple brands get taken down who talk about pelvic floor or women's health or something, and yeah. I want I want all the women's health companies to just stop using TikTok. And as soon as the dollars are gone, TikTok will listen, right? And like that's the lever we're gonna have to pull at some point to get some of this fixed.
Nayeem, my probiotic is Happy V. It really means happy vagina, but I could never buy that online because it wouldn't make it through to me, right? So,
Yeah.
another product endorsement.
So, forward-looking question. If we resolve all these problems and get this right, what do you want care to look like for women? Like give us an example of an experience or a use case that's completely different tomorrow than what we see today.
I'm going to start with what our partnership looks like. I mean, I think it's really the right answer. So, and one of the things that I can share about the way in which we built our platform is it's really purified data. And we do have the ability to connect back to mom, make sure that she is auto-correcting her input. We are actually feeding her world into the way in which we're learning and translating into discrete data fields. To that end, you can imagine a world where mom is at home quietly chatting with Emma, revealing that she's feeling, on the one end, really, really isolated, not sleeping very much. She's also hyper-productive, more productive than she's been in a while. Well, she happens to also be Asian American, which predisposes her for suicidal ideation. These are the tell in her unique demographic that she is likely at risk for postpartum depression, and we can intervene. Emma picks up quickly that there's some tells of suicidal ideation, some tells of what will be postpartum depression, and quickly navigates that issue to one of our care coordination navigators who happens to be South Asian, happens to actually understand what it means to be a tech mom in Cupertino, and begins to communicate with her to validate Emma's initial impressions, and then we're able to coordinate with the clinician to intervene upon mom well before it becomes an intractable event, otherwise known as maternal suicide, which is the #1 killer of mothers postpartum in the United States. So that's the use case.
And then she knows to escalate it to a provider. So then we tell her to go to her OBGYN or to go to the emergency room. So now we're not keeping providers out of it. They're increasing their revenue, they're decreasing their costs because they didn't get a call that they didn't need to get. This would be an example of a call that they do need to get. So it's like that whole, we have to make sure that we're taking my solution into her solution, then into the provider solution. So the whole system gets disrupted, but the whole care pathway improves, and everybody makes hopefully a little bit more money, which is why United Healthcare will work with me.
Can I have a question on that? So how do you close the loop in terms of the data coming back from the physician and treatment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
you may not have heard in the back, she asked, how do you close the loop on the data from the provider getting back into the experience with mom?
So there's multiple different ways to do it, and depending on what your user experience is, both from the provider side and then from the consumer side, it could change. So in one example, it could be plugged into the EHR system. So based off what the doctor's report is, it would go back into Emma and she'd have the education. That's assuming that that user experience was including the EHR. In other examples, we have a lot of client systems that we work in where that we do not plug into the provider because it lowers the trust value that the consumer has. Smoking marijuana while breastfeeding is a great example. They don't want to share that with their doctor because they're worried about CPS, but they will share it with Emma, and that's important. So in that case, Emma will prompt them, how did it go? What ended up happening? Okay, like you should call your OBGYN in a couple of days, maybe if you're not feeling better. Just helps her get the tools she needs to be a part of her own care pathway, or it goes back into a Lōvu, and then they remind her to come back as well.
Right, and what we've built, we have two mechanisms of closing the loop. One is a daily escalation report that integrates into the electronic medical record, enabling the clinician to understand what are those things I need to attenuate to today that are rising in risk that I can check off and make sure I feel good about managing my patient panel. The second thing that we do is provide what's called a weekly precision insights report that actually gathers in the data from machine learning like and the inputs of Emma, but also the data that we're collecting through our registry and learning of mom more broadly. So to that end, there's two mechanisms to actually communicate back. And what we're learning from our docs is you would think everything really needs to be EMR integrated. There's so much fatigue around that They're like, don't give me another platform to log into. Don't put more data that I have to attenuate to in the EMR, and then I have to amalgamate it. Provide me a single source of information I can go to, sort of the weekly single place of truth, so that I understand what's going on with my patient.
Happy to add to like more of like a different use case.
Yeah.
I would say that like for Celeste, a lot of what we're doing is like making trial and error obsolete. So let's say we have, I don't know, like a college student that needs to get on birth control for the first time. She just entered college. She doesn't know how to use student health insurance. I definitely didn't. And she's scared to even just talk to her parents about the fact that she's sexually active.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure she gets on the right birth control at the right time, the right formulation, so that she doesn't experience side effects? I know when I got on birth control for the first time, it was after like a particularly traumatic incident, and I had horrible, horrible side effects. I had mood swings, weight fluctuations. I got really, really depressed, and I ended up discontinuing the medication. I actually went to my co-founder, Gina, she's right there. Say hi, Gina. She actually assessed me as a pharmacist from the point of prescription back to diagnosis. And there was actually a better formulation for birth control for me that I was never offered, because my clinician I went to Planned Parenthood, spent about like 10, 15 minutes. They didn't really know my background. I didn't even know what to share.
Yeah.
And what we're doing with Celeste is like making sure that clinicians have a precision medicine tool built into their workflow, where all they have to do is click generate treatment plan, and we basically source a variety of different patient information, both from their EHR system as well as from outside sources, between multiple EHR systems based on a unique identifier, and we surface the right treatment plan consisting of that birth control, lifestyle changes, activity changes that patient needs to make.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what we're doing.
No, it's tremendous, right? The way we can actually transform care from the ground up with better data, wrap it back into the system, and you're all doing it in exceptional ways. So thank you for doing that. Almost. Delphine's ready to clap.
I'm just so impressed.
Yeah, no, I know. This was, no, absolutely. I think we can take one or two questions from the audience, and then we'll take a little break and get to our next panel. So I'll get to you, and then there's a hand in the back.
Oh, so I'm just going to ask,
You stand up
with respect
and project.
to some of these tools that you were speaking about, have you considered how you're going to make these accessible in low socioeconomic communities and areas where low socioeconomic communities? Because I know that a large majority of those communities might not have access to tech like others would, and also that's where a lot of these health-based issues are occurring and are around. So I'm just wondering if you've considered how you're going to make that more accessible to some communities that might need it more.
So let me just repeat the question she was asking, which is a great one, is given we're building a lot of great new tech, how do we ensure accessibility across low socioeconomic populations, across populations that may not have access to tech the way maybe all of us do? Because a lot of what we're actually trying to solve for in some cases are use cases that are happening in those populations that don't get surfaced early enough.
I can speak to it from the context of what we're building. So a couple of ways that we improve health equity and like accessibility of different precision medicine tools is one, working with local and state governments, thinking about like how we can implement our technology into community health centers, primary care practices, as well as telehealth platforms that have more accessibility to those rural areas that may not have like specialist services close by. We also look at different medical devices as channel partners, where we can, for example, for anesthesia equipment, we would implement our technology into anesthesia equipment and monitoring devices to help in real time monitor drug and dose changes that the anesthesiologist needs to make to prevent any side effects from happening while under, or prevent any kind of fatal circumstances from happening due to anesthesia. So I think there's a couple of different ways that you can improve access to care in those settings, but I think making sure that the tech is, to your point, like built for those settings as well is really important, So we work collaboratively with locals in the community in a co-design process almost, to help make sure that the kind of platform we're delivering is something that'll actually be adopted by that local community as well.
Could not agree more, Athena. And I think you said it best, like things that were designed for Upper East Side women.
Who are wonderful.
Right. Thank you for funding our firm. Thanks for the check. Fuck for you. When we designed Lōvu, we knew we would be nothing without the Medicaid mom. Really focused in on what was our commercialization strategy, how to get paid in a system that is frankly failing the underserved by focusing on that use case first and then expanding out to the commercial mom. If we nail it in that population, we are going to by far nail it in the commercial population. I think one of the other interesting things, by the way, our model does reimburse as well, sometimes even better in Medicaid. We underestimate the power of some of these state-based Medicaid plans and the managed care organizations that are administrating these plans. Many of them actually deeply care. And there's a lot of, to your point, Athena, social supports from a community perspective. We've just not connected the dots, right? So that's our obligation, that's our sacred mission, is to connect the dots to those resources locally and nationally. Our platform actually takes advantage of strategic partnerships and what we call marketplace partnerships. So for example, Albertsons, which is the Safeway footprint, is one of our partners. Our moms can physically go to the Safeway location, to the Starbucks within that Safeway location, plug into the Wi-Fi. Upwards of 26% of the moms in underserved areas of the United States actually don't have internet access. So we solve for that with that. And then we have a foundational arm, we have a partnership there that can provide cell phones. In addition to that, we have relationships beginning now with organizations like Samsung to really figure out how to put phones into the hands of moms that otherwise would not be able to access our platform.
One more? Maybe two more, but yes, I told you, so please.
A question about the data, mostly for Emma, but curious everyone's thoughts. So I'm a newish mom, I have an 18-month-old, and I think in my experience, a lot of the data that was most helpful would potentially be kind of invisible to like an AI model, where it was the group chat, it was sometimes even like my employer's Slack channel of like other moms, so that I like, how can you access that? Because sometimes I'd go online and I'd search for something and was not, like nothing was really making sense, I wasn't finding it, and then I'd like text all of my mom friends and like the light bulb went off of like, this is like, yes, this happened to me too, here's what you do about it. So that wisdom of the crowd versus what is available like to everyone online. I wish like, how could I like upload my group chat so you can read it and like gain knowledge from it?
I have an 18-month-old and I use Emma every day. The reason why Emma helps me is that we actually built Emma to live in our own social tech platform, which happened to be a matchmaking platform for moms. So we had over 10 million interactions in our social connection network, which was done between women to women and women and doctors. So Emma specifically will give you that. I think it comes down to a lot of what the theme has been today. You need to know what tools you're using for what purpose. That's not just for AI. Like when you see my investor pitch, it starts with AI like on slide 1, and we don't really go into AI very much, even though we're a deep tech company. It's about the product, the solution, who you serve. So when you adopt a product, whether it's AI or not, who built it, what are you using it for? Like I wouldn't use Emma to write your emails if you're a real estate agent. Actually, Emma probably wouldn't do that for you, but a lot of examples of like, and Emma probably still would, but that doesn't make sense. Don't go there for that. So yes, and again, the partnerships, they make up those gaps. Like if we were in all these different segments and you went here for there and here, like you would see that. But a lot of the partners we work with have community elements, so we're getting ready to announce a very big breast pump partnership we're doing, and we specifically are working with them because their mobile product has mass amounts of moms, but it's community-based, also attached to their pump. So Emma in their product is like our data set plus theirs. Like I get goosebumps because that's gonna replace everything, but still keep your mom Facebook group. I mean, they're fabulous. And again, is it controlled by the right person?
Well, that community superpower for women is dramatic, right? In so many instances of our lives, we find the insight coming from other women around us, and so it's fabulous. And yes, AI can leverage it, and
if it's built right.
If it's built right. This is like the underlying theme of the whole conversation. One more.
I'm the founder of a company called Lōvu. We are a women's health company building tech products to make breastfeeding more efficient and sustainable for new moms. My question is around gaps in education that exist. Obviously, we spoke a lot about data gaps that exist, but there's also a huge bias that exists within the system. Not trying to diss on doctors, but they get their information from educational resources, and obviously with data, you can improve the research that exists. Could you talk to some of the initiatives that you have ongoing for
Yeah, I'm like
research?
jumping.
Okay, no, that's a great question. Let me just repeat it quickly. His question was, we're building lots of tech, lots of systems. The data inherently always has bias. How are they each building in a way that manages for and/or controls or improves that bias?
So would love to partner with you, so let's talk after. Let me talk about how Lōvu has handled this. What we've done is recognize that each mother's journey is her own. In addition to that, she's informed by her local environment, also her socioeconomic and her demographic background. So for each mom, we have tailored education specific to her. So on the average, our moms are going to get lactation consulting and education around what it means to breastfeed anywhere between 20 and 29 weeks. It's going to depend well before she actually gets into the acute care delivery system, where she's absolutely too fatigued to learn how to exclusively breastfeed while delivering a baby, and then frankly shamed if she couldn't figure it out or a baby didn't latch, right? That's the wrong answer. So we educate them in advance. The question becomes, what type of mom with what background should be educated at which point, and how many visits does she need? So we precisely educate her based upon her unique background.
Yeah. It's a lot. I will say also there's been a lot more conversation on bringing the ethical and responsibility guidelines to AI is also a big theme of what we all have to be thinking about, because it's a data in, data out problem, right? And so as we're taking in culturally competent data from specific locations, specific communities, we have to make sure that we're treating it properly and that we're learning from it properly. And I think everyone's doing it slightly differently, but we will start to see more cohesion as a lot of what you're building starts to scale, and we start to, again, like you said, connect the dots across it. So I want to say thank you for being with us today. Women's health, and some of these things I have to say, it's $1 trillion category. If you're looking for founders who are changing the game for women's health, this is it. They are the start of a whole list of founders that are completely shifting how we're going to live, how we're going to thrive, how women are going to get the care they need, and really transform how that's driven by data and insight in a way that's incredibly powerful. So talk to them, learn more, and think about women's health as a category. There's a lot of women here, it is our life, but like really for the men in the room, really thinking about women's health as a place where you could put capital to work, because there's a lot of opportunity to be had in getting behind the kind of tech that these women are building. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Well, now we can clap. If you want to get a cup of coffee or something very quick, like 5-minute break, and then Jen and the next panel will come up and we'll get started.
Thank you, everyone. We'll get started because this one we have lots to talk about. My job was easy because our panelists are a wealth of information, so I literally gave them one question each, and we'll just go. So, I was talking to Delphine. We did New York Tech. Our last panel with Delphine. Also, we talked about reproductive care. It was a few months after the first year anniversary of Dobbs. Now we're heading into our second anniversary of Dobbs. And God, it sucks. It's horrible. I was just reading up on some articles. Things are crazy. Like they're changing abortion pills to dangerous controlled substances. What's happening in Idaho with our panelists will talk about it. EMTALA in Idaho, I think like 14 states now, women can't control whether or not they can get abortion in almost any conditions other than those that'll kill them, right? And so we talked about longevity, AI, all these great innovations. Like this is a topic I kind of mentioned in our last panel at New York Tech Week last year or in October. But we have all these great movements, but then our our own rights to our own body to control it is being taken away. And I think, well, I kind of wanted to kind of lead with that because our first panelist, Julia, will kind of give us the lay of the land, what's happening in front of the courts, what's in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, who, you know, infamously gave us Dobbs, right? And then kind of Julia from Center for Reproductive Rights will kind of give us what her organization is doing in that fight. But before we move there, I wanted each of our panelists to give a few introductory minutes as to what they're doing, and then we'll let Julia kind of lead the discussion.
Great, so very quickly, my name is Julia Taylor Kennedy. I lead corporate engagement for the Center for Reproductive Rights. If you haven't heard of us, we are a nonprofit that works to expand access to reproductive health care and rights through law, and that's both through litigation and policy. So you'll hear more in a couple minutes what we're up to, but thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Julia.
Hi, I'm Delphine O'Rourke, and I am here in two capacities. The first is as a partner with Portfolio in the Femtech 3 Fund. And the second is I'm a healthcare regulatory lawyer, and I've been advising clients on issues corporate around women's health, and now really diving deep into reproductive care because of its impact on for a lot of reasons, including what bodily autonomy, but its impact on investors' willingness to invest in women's health solutions, because women's health is already seen as risky, and then you add all of the confusion that we're going to get into, and investors see it as even riskier. So, and then I admire Noel for a lot of different reasons, and I'm also going to take now one of her cues of having one foot down. So I was like, that makes you feel like you're not up here, totally. So thank you, and thank you to the last panel. That was a great tee up for us.
Hi everyone, is this on? Hello, hi everyone, I'm Janna Meyrowitz-Turner. I'm here also in a few capacities. Synastry Capital is my company. I describe it as a cross-sector impact vehicle to change the ways that money and power flow in the world. I ran a PR firm in the consumer fashion, beauty, wellness space for 15 years that I started when I was a baby. And as a result, I ended up building a portfolio of women's health companies that I'm an angel investor in. I'm in Hey Jane and Origin and Wealthy and some cannabis companies run by women. And so I am an investor. I have an investor hat. I also am a advisor, coach, consultant to a lot of leaders across every sector, men and women, through personal brand alignment, which is really like authenticity advisory. And through that lens, I also have what I call a stakeholder activism lab. That is the third piece, and that is where we do systems change that is bigger than any one brand, company, person. And through that, I co-founded VCs for Repro, a coalition in 2022 that came together before the midterms election to tie abortion to innovation imperative, economic imperative, democracy imperative. So we'll be reactivating for the 2024 election. So excited to talk about all of that.
So good. So yes, I introduced kind of what we wanted Julia to kind of give us, but Julia, can you please provide us the lay of the land of, in terms of current cases in front of SCOTUS, what Center for Reproductive Rights really view as important cases that can really kind of impact whether going forward or maybe even moving backwards, right, depending on the outcomes of the reproductive care landscape.
Yes, happy to do so. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. The way the sound works in here, I wasn't sure, so I'm glad you all can hear me. Happy to do that. I have some notes because there is so much that has happened, and I'm sure many of you have been reading some of it in the news, but hopefully with this roundup, we can also help you understand some of the relevance to the work you're doing every day, because as Delphine mentioned, it's impacting the markets you're entering into, it's impacting consumer sentiment, it's impacting what employees want to be seeing from their employers, both in terms of their messaging and the benefits that they're providing. So one thing to note is that when you look at elections and when abortion is on the ballot, it has won every single time. And so access to abortion is actually quite popular in the US right now. Even in purple states like Ohio, when voters are asked, do they want a ban on abortion? They say no. If they want access to be protected, they say yes. And so that's one reason why there is momentum and this discord that we're feeling between what people in power are putting in place and what's coming up through the courts, and where public opinion and the opinion of consumers and employees sits. At Center for Reproductive Rights, we focus on abortion as one of 4 reproductive healthcare issues that we're working on, but they're all incredibly interconnected. We've heard a lot about maternal health already today, and obviously that is very closely connected to having access to the full spectrum of healthcare that someone needs when they're pregnant. We also focus on contraceptive care and access to fertility, and all of these issues have been coming up in different ways through litigation, state and federal policy. So today I'm going to focus on 3 things. The first is just a bit of an update on what's going on with states. The second is SCOTUS and the 2 cases that are in front of the Supreme Court, and we're expecting decisions on those imminently this month. And then the third is how this relates to companies and the private sector. And Delphine will speak even more to that after I'm done. So since the Dobbs decision almost 2 years ago, 14 states have put in place bans, and 11 more have put in place restrictions. So 23 states in our country right now have, it's very difficult, have kind of hostility towards abortion access. I can't talk to 23 states, so I'll focus on 3. Arizona, Texas, and Florida. You already mentioned that Louisiana recently has made medication abortion a controlled substance, and we can talk more about that if anyone has any questions. But I'll start with Florida, which their state Supreme Court just confirmed something that had been paused, which is a 6-week ban on abortion. And this has impacts far beyond the state of Florida, because Florida was one of the few places where you could access abortion in the Southeast past a few weeks into someone's pregnancy. And so many people, including myself, don't know that they're pregnant at 6 weeks into their pregnancy, and so you can imagine how difficult it is to have that time limitation in place. In Arizona, we recently saw a bit of whiplash where the state Supreme Court reinstated an 1864 abortion ban. So if you think about what was happening in this country in 1864, Arizona wasn't a state, women couldn't vote, penicillin hadn't been invented. That was the law that the Supreme Court put into place. Now, the governor and the legislature actually very quickly passed and signed a repeal to that ban. But the fact that even for a couple of weeks, that kind of law could be put in place into a state in our country is really concerning. Both Florida and Arizona will be voting on abortion in the election, and so given the voting record, we're hopeful, but those are very important campaigns, and if you're interested, something to take a look at. The third state I'll talk about is Texas, which has one of the most extreme bans in the country and started putting it into place before the Dobbs decision even came down. We have quite a bit of litigation going on in Texas, and 2 of our cases have reached a lot of public attention because they focus on the medical exceptions in Texas's ban, which are extremely vague and unclear, and have very high penalties for doctors who might perform abortions in emergency situations. So women with really serious pregnancy complications or very compromised conditions for fetuses are often left waiting until they are at death's door in order to receive care. One case that you may have read about was of Kate Cox that went before the Texas Supreme Court in December and gained a lot of national attention. And then we very recently received a verdict in a case with 22 plaintiffs called Zorowski versus Texas. In both cases, the Texas Supreme Court provided very little clarity to the medical exceptions in the state's ban. And so we're very concerned about that and disappointed in the results. But what we are gratified by is the level of attention that came to those cases and women's stories, pointing out that abortion is used in so many instances that are not well understood and affect so many pregnant women who need access to life-saving interventions. just to share a little bit more, to give you a sense of some of the stories about Amanda's experience, who was our lead plaintiff. She was told that she had to wait 3 days to get an abortion and wait for her body to go into sepsis in order to access care, which she did. She was in the ICU for 2 weeks. Her family flew in from around the country because they were expecting the worst news. And luckily, Amanda survived the experience, but she is unable to carry her own baby to term due to the impact on her reproductive organs. So if you think about the objective of supporting women who have very wanted pregnancies and want to build their families, the exceptions, the medical exceptions to these bans don't support that. In that case, we actually were gratified, and in the past 2 years have been really gratified to see the private sector coming to us, asking how they can work with us, support our efforts. And in the Zorowski case, Bumble approached us, the women's dating app, to say, can we file a friend of the court brief? And we said, sure, very welcome to. And dozens of companies actually ended up joining on that brief. The argument that they made was, as employers in the state, they saw a third of their workforce leave when they gave them that option soon after the Texas ban was put in place. Companies are telling us they can't hold conferences or retreats in Texas if they want pregnant employees to attend, because expecting parents are frankly afraid to travel to banned states. So tourism and conferences have been hit by this as well. We're pursuing other similar medical exceptions cases in other states, and again, if you're interested in learning more, let us know. So I will now move to the Supreme Court. I will try to pick up the pace. There are two.
So interesting.
There are 2 cases in front of the Supreme Court about abortion. You know, in Dobbs, the justices wrote that this needs to be a state policy issue, not a national issue. But 2 years later, they've taken 2 cases on the issue. The first one is over medication abortion, specifically mifepristone. And whether we want to roll back access as a country to a very thoroughly reviewed drug. And what's interesting there is actually we've seen a huge groundswell of the biotech and pharmaceutical industry speaking extremely loudly in all the major press outlets, also filing an amicus brief. More than 300 companies signing on to that one, as well as the large industry associations, bio and pharma, to say this really questioning at district court level the FDA's approval of a drug like mifepristone puts into question the regulatory agency's power on any drug. And so, especially for the work that you all do, having that type of uncertainty around regulatory power is extremely concerning, whether you are focused on reproductive health care or not. The second case in front of the Supreme Court is, as you said, the EMTALA case, which is about whether state law can override federal regulation around emergency abortion care. And it was very interesting to listen into the oral arguments in that case and hear some of the questions really digging into how sick a woman needs to be to obtain this level of care. There was also an amicus brief filed in that case from many companies that pointed out that healthcare deserts, frankly, are cropping up in states like Idaho and other areas of the country that will only grow, because what we are seeing is that OBGYNs are leaving, concerned that
OB units are closing.
Yeah, and residents aren't coming. And so there's both a sort of current staffing as well as future pipeline issue for any type of OBGYN care in different states. So the last thing that I'll share before I pass the mic is the way that we're seeing people respond and some of the numbers. There was a CNBC poll that came out just a couple weeks ago showing that 62% of employees ages 18 to 42 don't want to live in a banned state. And so I think we're going to be seeing more of this. It's a complex picture because there are some growth economies in banned states, but the question that we have is what type of talent is agreeing to take positions in those states? And how is that mix changing due to people's concerns about public policy? One upcoming study that we advised on, early data shows that 1 in 4 Americans have moved considered moving or know someone who has due to reproductive health care restrictions. And so this is affecting people's decision-making and behavior. Other studies have found that women are 3 times more likely to drop out of the workforce and 4 times more likely to live in poverty if they don't have access to abortion in their state. And other studies have found that it costs state economies upwards of $110 billion a year when there are restrictions to reproductive health care. So there's a lot of numbers and information out there, and my call is to get informed. We need to talk about this more. We need to create more spaces like this, which CRR is doing in partnership with companies, as well as join amicus briefs. Think about your own policies as you're setting up your companies. And we have lots more ideas of what to do, which you can grab me for afterwards or ask questions about. But I think you're seeing on the ground how companies are responding. So I will finally pause there.
Thank you so much, Julia. That I think that lays us up perfectly for what we wanted Delphine to speak on, because Delphine kind of distill that for us. What does it mean? How should companies take that, given like that's so depressing? And yet, you know, how is it going to impact innovation? How is it really going to, you know, how should companies take that? I think kind of where you've been speaking on a lot is that the real world implications of what these laws that maybe look far away to us from New York or California or wherever the super blue states are, but for the rest of the country, what could that be?
So thank you. What do we keep on having? Okay. Thank you for that. And I would say, you know, we all, in my opinion, owe you a debt and your team because you've been the warriors on the front line. And that's, you know, clap on that. I could give opinions from my desk. You're out there and getting the heat. And for those of you who may be lawyers in the room, the way they've strategically picked the cases, the issues you've brought, that's not a coincidence, and it's been incredibly impactful. So thank you for that. So I think for this audience, I would say, you know, a couple of things. We'll start out by, again, investors or in general, there's a perception that women's health is risky. You know, so we can trace that back. Why? You know, because of clinical trials, because really tragic outcomes in the 70s and before. But when you're raising money, you've got to address that. You know, because it's in the back of people's minds, whether they're articulating it or not, women's health is risky. So in the VC, you know, from a VC perspective and a legal perspective, what do? We de-risk situations, or we assess risk, and we figure out which risk we're willing to tolerate. In particular, if you're in the maternal health space, that's what's going to be the impact of the Supreme Court decisions. What's going to be the impact of what I would call the overall confusion. I think that's what I'd like to touch on for a second and then get back to, so how do you take this depressing state of affairs and turn it into an advantage for you? My concern, in addition to the concerns that you've raised, is one, it is so confusing. Okay, it is so confusing. So let's take Arizona. I was like, so what's going on in Arizona? And when you dig into what's going on in Arizona, yes, it was repealed, but then it goes into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourns, but there's no date when the legislature adjourns. And, you know, so we could be having a gap. It is confusing for lawyers. So how can we, when we think about the downstream impact, so your physicians, your patients, you know, a lot of women don't even know if it's legal or not. And frankly, in Arizona, we have the risk of, you know, maybe what I call a stub period of 45 days where this 1864 law goes back into effect. So, and that's across the country. You know, Tennessee, Florida, it's just this constant change, which leaves investors, leaves companies like yours, patients, saying, well, where are we? You know, we used to think the telemedicine landscape was confusing. You know, because we had 50 states and 50 different regulations. Telemedicine seems straightforward now. So when you're thinking about what's going to be my investment, you mentioned Hey Jane, okay? I mean, portfolio, we have an investment in Hey Jane. You're thinking, okay, well, what happens? And the big issues being, what happens with the Supreme Court decision? So, and those of us who are really into this, we're all thinking, when is it going to drop? And the bets are on a Friday, so probably this Friday, not the Friday before, so this is coming down. You know, my prediction is going to be The Bridgestone case will be, because it's a standing issue, and EMTALA is a big deal on the conflict, because it's not just about, although emergency care is important, and we can go into that, and how that impacts physicians and physician care decisions, but it's a broader issue of federalism. Can now states go and make their own decisions on whatever they want, way beyond abortion, even though there are federal laws in place? And that gets me to my third point, which is what lawyers call slippery slope, is where does this stop? Okay, abortion's one that gets a lot of politics and sort of sucks the energy out of the room, but there's no end in sight. I'll give you an example, IVF, and I think this is also where we can shift our mindset. When the IVF, sort of attack came down, the reaction was, oh my God, I can't believe they'd go after IVF. Okay, and I've cited this before. I teach a course at Columbia Law School on reproductive justice in the law, and one of the sample simulation exercises we did in January was assume IVF is now illegal. What's the downstream impact? You're a private equity company and you've rolled up, most of the fertility clinics now in the US are owned by PE. You bought, egg storage, sperm storage. How does that impact your business? All from a business lens. These are, anything that can be used will be used, in my opinion. There's nothing that's off limits. So, this Roe will never be struck down. Guess what? It was, okay? We're never gonna be in a situation where there's no exception for rape and incest. Guess what? We do. IVF will be never attacked? Yes. Comstock Act. Has anyone heard of a Comstock Act? Okay, for those of you who have really nothing to do this weekend, look at the Comstock Act. No, but seriously, this is an 1800s law. We're gonna see it come back. It's a federal law, and the scope is incredibly broad, that anything that is lewd, that is offensive, cannot be, it's long, cannot be mailed interstate. So the current attack is contraceptives. Okay, so yes, access to contraceptives, but if you can't mail it to the neighboring state or 4 states, look at the Comstock Act. That one will be coming back. And within that definition, we go back to coalitions. You could put porn, you could put medical devices. Why medical devices? Because it's anything that helps support. So let's say you need a scalpel, that would be put, so Comstock Act. Nothing is off the table. When Trump said, I would have no opposition to women who are pregnant being tracked, it's sort of, as a community, what I'm advocating for is we've got to change our mindset and think nothing's off the table. So what are we going to do to prepare? So coming back to your companies and this sort of nothing's off the table is, I would suggest that you address it. Okay, so what's going to be the impact? And you might say, but I'm in primary care. How is it going to impact me? Well, we know there's been a ripple effect in primary care. Okay, we know, for example, that Black men are not going to see their physicians. There's direct correlation because of the aiding and abetting language in the Texas statute. Okay, because of misinformation around your provider having to call the cops. So there's this view, widespread view, that you go in and you share, what do you do that's illegal? I don't know. Or that you think is, okay, whatever you were doing this weekend that was illegal, okay? And that you happen to share with your physician, while I was doing that, I broke my leg, that your physician is gonna call and say, I was gonna say smoking dope, but that's legal everywhere now. So that's not a good example. Yeah, dope now is like, woo, just go outside on the street. So there's this fear. We see downstream ripple effects. I'll give you another example. With the fact that Planned Parenthood is closed. A lot of women went to Planned Parenthood for their primary care. We're seeing AIDS go up. Why? Because they're not getting access to PrEP. Mammograms go down. Why not? Because they're not going to Planned Parenthood. So it's not just about abortion. So what I would suggest when you're talking to investors, we talk about changing our deck, is take that question head on. And then say, this is how it could impact us. If there's a federal ban, for example, how this is going to impact us. But this is also how we are leveraging this to improve, let's say, patient flow. We're rolling out an educational campaign, and it's going to explain why X, Y, and Z. And I think that's the way to sort of tip a very depressing situation, where there's so much misinformation and people are feeling bullied, rightfully so, into, okay, this is how I'm going to position myself and acknowledge the downstream impact. And the downstream impact is throughout the medical profession, and it doesn't just stop there. I mean, you talked about real estate, you talked about housing, but to just talk about it, talk about the impact, so we also get out of this business model of, and I'm talking to investors all the time, we're like, oh, it's just about abortion, and that company doesn't provide abortion services. And I'll leave you with one last example. Again, a couple hours after the Dobbs decision, I was on the phone with the legal team of a major airline. They don't provide abortions, but they were thinking, how can we be liable because of aiding and abetting, and what if we have a pregnant woman on our flight? This is an issue now. If you have an employee, this is an issue that touches you. So happy to connect online, discuss more, but I think it's a real opportunity to step into a bad situation and show that there's a community behind change.
Thank you, Delphine. And then I think that sets up really nicely for Janna, right? Because now we're in election year. We got all that. We got the lay of the land. Delphine gave us nothing's off the table, so we're gonna talk about it. And in many cases, you kind of mentioned that democracy. We're talking about democracy here, right? It's not just about our bodies anymore. There's such broader impacts. Kind of given what you are doing, what you are seeing, the conversations you are having, give us some real world actions that we should be contemplating, considering.
Yeah, this was such great stage setting, thank you. Everything is connected, everything. Abortion touches everything, and so you tell me what's important to you and important to your husband or the men in your life, and I will tie it back to abortion, and I'm happy to help anyone here do that. Saving abortion access equals saving democracy. I know people in this room love data. The data shows that erosion of women's rights and erosions of abortion rights globally are linked to authoritarianism. And so before VCs for Repro became VCs for Repro, I had put together a memo called Connecting the Dots, Rebranding Abortion to Get Men to Pay Attention. And we essentially, I'm gonna tell everyone here what the very simple 3-line statement is that VCs signed on to for VCs for Repro, and you can look it up on vcsforrepro.com. But the 3-line statement itself is quite rich and gives you lots of threads to pull on when it comes to how to talk about these things. So the first line was that criminalizing abortion violates human rights and is anti-innovation. The second line was that this matters to the people investing in the future of our economy. And the third line was to vote like it matters to you on November 8th. And this year it'll be November 5th. I forget how many days exactly we are out, but every day is important. And I also believe that I say a lot that abortion is your business, abortion is everyone's business, because the powers that be, this is all connected, right? So the powers that be are using abortion to smash our democracy because they're kind of hoping that people just won't pay attention. And the chaos, the cruelty, the confusion, that is the point. That is the point. They want us playing whack-a-mole. They flood the zone so we can't pay attention to this problem because we're dealing with this thing and this thing and this thing. And how many people in this room feel time and attention strapped all the time, right? It's also connected, we talk about the lack of research and women not being included in clinical trials, and we talk about the lack of funding and the lack of trust or the perceived risk. These are all connected. This is all rooted in misogyny and lack of trust of women and doctors. And so we need to say the quiet parts out loud because we have our vote in November, but we have our voice every day until then. And again, innovation, the economy, democracy, I think it's really important to also say that I give the example of a white male CEO who I was speaking with and helped connect the dots for him that he understood that his wife's miscarriage and treatment thereafter was a medical abortion. This was even maybe before the leak in May of 2022. And you could see his synapses firing and like the aperture widening, you know, smart systems thinkers, people focused on the future and innovation. And so the dots connected quite quickly that this is about control, and that, you know, I say often it behooves the anti-abortion movement for our bodies to be mysteries. That's why there have not been investments in research and all of these things. But then for this guy to realize that he didn't have to tell his wife's miscarriage story at the company town hall or on MSNBC. He could talk about the innovation imperative, the economic imperative, the democracy imperative. He could even say that doing business in a constantly changing regulatory environment is driving my general counsel crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little bit of a balance of using humor, like knowing when to take it seriously, but also when to really call people in. Nayeem and I were having coffee this morning, and we were talking about the importance of the words that we use. And one of the things that came up for me too, I think that a lot of us, you know, we kind of we'll ask questions, we'll be curious, right? And by the way, that's a lot of how I figured out what the angles would be to get people to pay attention. But there are certain things that we have to not pose as a question. We have to pose them as statements. And things like abortion access is directly tied to democracy is something that we need to say as a statement. We need to say that, that abortion bans are tools of economic suppression and are being used to systemically disenfranchise people. When it comes to, so I've given you lots of kind of like talk tracks, and I'm happy to talk to anyone offline and pull at these threads. I love it when a friend will be like, I'm about to go in to talk to my government affairs guy, and I want to like talk about the fact that we're giving to anti-politicians, and I know that this is what they'll say. So I love being in people's pockets for those talking points. When it comes to pragmatically figuring out, like we all hear everyone can do something. You know, you can't do everything, but everyone can do something. I go even deeper to say that we are actually each uniquely positioned to do something unique because of our unique points of power and influence. And I have worked with very powerful and influential people, so I can say that 100% of us underestimate our power and our influence and what the right nudge from the right person at the right time can do, because that's how we got VCs for Repro. It will shock no one in this room that some of the most effective conversion strategies were one male VC texting another male VC and saying, this is on your radar, right?
Over golf.
What?
Over golf.
Over golf, right, over golf. When it comes to actually being like, okay, this is all, you know, the chaos, the confusion, the cruelty is the point, the chilling impact is the point, right? There's women who where it's legal, they're still just afraid. Fear is primal. Fear is, you know, very deep. Pragmatically, I say that you can look at improving access on the ground. Every abortion that someone gets versus not being able to get is a success and will change and changes people's lives, as anyone here knows who is of reproductive age. So there's access on the ground, improving access, and then there's improving and increasing political voice and political power. And Jody will talk to us in a little bit about the Women's Health PAC. Political voice and political power look really different. And to bring it back to the ballot initiatives, the reason why, you know, people are calling it direct democracy, because what they are doing is silencing us. Abortion is more popular than your most popular politician. I need to update it, but I did an essay in 2022 actually about all the things that cannabis, dope, and abortion have in common, including that they are both stigmatized despite being wildly popular. It's all healthcare, and it's about trusting patients and doctors with what's best for them. Plus the media and disinformation, right? Cannabis has been demonized by big tobacco, big alcohol, big pharma, trillions of dollars of lobbying for most of our lived lives. So I think it's really important to, again, when you're trying to call people into this conversation, to meet them where they are, as they say, and to find the different angles and pull them together. I have so many other things I can say, but I want to kind of land. I want to like land the plane, but also like, you know, double click on the things that are most salient to people. I will. The VCs for Repro Coalition, we will be reactivating it for 2024. Make sure that you go to vcsforrepro.com and put your email in, or email me, janna@jannamturner.com. We will be doing briefings where we bring together the state of reproductive rights as well as what is the innovation imperative, again, arming people with talking points, building community around these topics to build trust and safety in having the conversations. And it's an election-centric single issue campaign, so we're kind of in stealth and research right now, but VCs can sign on to the coalition. You sign on as a fund, not as an individual. That was really important, right? The female GP can't just sign on. It has to be the full firm, and the way that we have measured, we did not ask the VCs for any money. We asked for their social and cultural capital on this issue, because certain VCs, more than their $1 million, it's really valuable for them to say that banning any form of healthcare is bad for the economy and bad for democracy. We had 125 VC firms in 2022. We plan to have at least 250 for the general election this year. The AUM, the assets under management across the firms that signed on to the statement, which was part of how we defined its heft and its relevance, we had 112 billion with a B of AUM across the funds that were signed on last time, and that also will go up a lot this year. And you said something about 110 billion being what states quote as what it is costing them. And so that is a very interesting number to put together in context with the power of the coalition.
We'll take just 2 questions since we're way over time. So, right here.
Hi, I'm Ashley Bush. I'm with Emmeline Ventures. Delphine, I was nodding at everything that you said. I think it was so on point. I had, for example, someone last night who came up to me and said, this was a male investor, that he would not invest in reproductive companies because the risk of being blocked out of certain markets was just too high right now. So you spoke about some of the ways that portfolio companies can kind of create a carrot, right? Is there anything that we as investors can do to create a carrot for these companies that are helping, so we don't lose on new opportunities for reproductive, fertility health, access to abortion, all of these things? Or ultimately, will it have to sort of be more of a legal stick, which we also have in the room, thankfully.
I'll just briefly summarize for those who couldn't hear in the back. Is there something for VCs to offer as carrots towards portcos who are viewing some of these, and other investors who may view access to these type of services as risky, which Delphine kind of mentioned on?
So my recommendation in what I've done for Portfolio is I do educational sessions. Because part of it is lack of understanding and just how does this work? Okay, what's the real impact? What is standing? They're like, what are we even talking about? Oh, EMTALA. Does everybody in the room know what EMTALA is? Raise your hand if you know what EMTALA is. Okay, yeah, and I'm not saying this to say, oh, you're uneducated. Talk to me about, the latest in physics, and I have no clue what's going on. So we're having these conversations, and when you look at the media, and that's one of the reasons that, I'm out here talking, is even the lawyers don't understand, okay? So how do we expect, so to get quickly, translate it, have education, educate the VCs, educate the partners, and then go through with your, again, and I've recently worked with Hey Jane on this. So let's look at the different scenarios. So if the VCs or the Ps are really concerned about X, Y, and Z, they're concerned about a federal ban on abortion. Okay, realistically, when could that happen? And if that happens, how does our business model change? How do we pivot? So it's yet another risk. You're saying, okay, we have business model A, business model B, but when people say, oh, well, when do you think Dobbs is going to be overturned, and how is that going to impact your business model? I want to pull my eyebrows out. I'm like, Dobbs is not going to be overturned. So, so the specific response is educate. Educate your partners, educate your LPs if you have LPs, and then work on different scenarios, and that's just another risk. And while I have the microphone, I'll just add to you, because I speak a lot to different groups. Will say to me, well, I don't have money to invest. I don't have money to put in a PAC. I don't have I said, okay, but you have a vote and you have email. And even if you don't have email, you have a pen. Write to your Congress people. Most workers people are not in this conversation, but if they get 50 letters saying, this is important to me, they'll start paying attention, 100 letters. Because where does this stop? Where is it, there are other areas in healthcare where you need to have different opinions, okay? But those are for, inpatient admission. They're for declaring you brain dead. I mean, what we're seeing now is the legislature inserting itself in medicine. And that's really scary. Whole other topic. But you all can do something today, and even before November 5th.
Just one thing to build on that. I think it's on. I cannot hear myself. I'm so sorry. Both on what you just said and what you said earlier, I think that the power that you all hold as private sector leaders, you do underestimate. And especially in these quiet conversations that you may be having on any topic with a lawmaker. We're a 501c3. I cannot speak to the election. But what I can say is we work on federal policy, and there's both an opportunity for a ban and access in the years to come. So if there's an opportunity for access, there's also enormous power that you hold, especially given the work that you all focus on to push for that access, which would stop some of the questions that you're getting. So just planting that seed.
One last question back there. Yeah.
So VC for Repro, wonderful coalition. A lot of us here are founders or new founders. There's a lot of power in this room across, and companies as well. Is there another group that we can get behind for private startup companies founded by women that kind of connects us all against?
If anyone's interested in leveraging their community for collective power, I'm happy to talk about that. We do build community within VCs for Repro, and a lot of founders writing to their VCs was a huge conversion. I need to see your name on this list. And I would say some of the more beautiful social media posts were from employees of portfolio companies where VCs had signed on, and to say this is unprecedented. This is so, I feel so backed and supported. You're talking about being a VC-backed founder. Doesn't always mean the best thing. I had another, I often say also, these are no time to bifurcate yourself, right? We have personal and professional networks and relationships to talk about these things. However, I can be helpful in coalescing founders together. It may be even getting some of Female Founders Collective and some of the other groups together in a room to say, what do we want to do? How do we want to meet the moment? I'm here to help.
Other groups that are out there include the Don't Ban Equality campaign, where I think more than 1,000 organizations have signed on to that, and a very wide range of sizes, and they have regular briefings for their members. There's also the Biotech Sisterhood within biotech is very active on these issues and helped organize the amicus brief in the mifepristone case that I mentioned earlier. And as we start corporate engagement at the center, if you're specifically interested in litigation and policy issues, feel free to reach out.
I also think it's important, if people don't know about the work that Reproductive Ventures is doing, where they're filing shareholder proposal. If you are an investment bank and you manage assets and therefore you're a shareholder in T-Mobile, they're filing shareholder proposals in three main areas. One are about political donations that don't align with publicly stated corporate values, right? It's Pride Month, but we're also giving to anti-LGBTQ people that are banning trans care. So those mismatches. Also with offering of reproductive health care benefits, and then the other one is what I call risks of culture, the risk of not reading the room. The other thing, I don't know if anyone here has read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. He talks about how there's no such thing as the future, right? Because when it's the future, it's now. And so we're talking about the future of women's health, but the future of women's health is in our hands. We get to decide this, right? And so when people say to me, what's gonna happen? Is this gonna happen? Is this gonna happen? I'm I don't know. What are you gonna do? And what are you gonna do? And what are you gonna do? And who are you gonna talk to about these things? Because we cannot underestimate our power and influence.
And one thing that you guys all mentioned is it's not just abortion. This is healthcare, right? Yeah, it affects so many different things. Thank you so much for our amazing panel. Thank you all.